Hey, howdy, hi! Welcome or welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for stopping by to join today. I really do appreciate it. My name is Ellie, and I'm a witch. This over here is my teaching assistant, Andy, and today is Tuesday, and on my channel that means it is tea time and true crime. So today's case is about the Turpin family, and it is a little bit heavier of a case. It does have a lot of child abuse involved in it, so if that's not something you think you can handle, I completely understand. I did do 2 other videos this week. On Sunday, I talked about the cryptids of South Dakota, and then yesterday I talked about the history of corsets. So if either of those is more to your liking, go ahead and check it out. I have plenty of other non-child abuse related content on my channel. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the video. I know that a lot of people dislike when true crime channels will talk about an abuser's past, especially when it comes to cases of child abuse or murder. However, I do believe that looking at an abuser's past can shed light on the way that their brain works, and I'm not saying this is an excuse, but rather an explanation. In the case of Louise Turpin, her childhood is one that needs to be looked at. Louise and her sister Teresa were sold to wealthy pedophiles in their area when the 2 girls were just children. Now, both girls begged their mother not to subject them to the abuse, but time and time again they were molested. Now, Teresa says that the abuse broke her spirit and that she felt it was worse for her sister. Though Teresa never thought that her sister would turn out the type of person she did, other people reported that Louise was never the good girl Teresa thought she was. Now, growing up, Louise turned to alcohol, which is fair, but she became a nasty alcoholic. She gambled, practiced witchcraft, and partied like no other. Some were not as surprised as her sister as to the type of person she became. Now, David Turpin's childhood, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. He was described as nerdy, he held a position in the Bible club, chess club, and science club, and was a singer in an a cappella choir. Now, people had high hopes for David, and he did work many high-paying, prestigious jobs in his life, proving himself to be intelligent. There was nothing more to note for David other than his intelligence. He kept to himself, valuing his education over most everything else. Now, when the couple met is not completely known, but we do know that David and Louise met in church, and at the time David was 23 and Louise was just 16. Then, on February 11th of 1985, the pair eloped. David had somehow convinced Louise's high school to allow him to sign her out for the day, and the pair made it several states before police were able to return them home. Now, the reason that Louise's father wanted them home was because he wanted the 2 to have a proper ceremony, as he was a preacher, and that was important to him. 4 years after the wedding, the 2 welcomed their first child into the world in Texas, where the pair lived and worked. While living in Texas, the couple went on to have several more children before relocating from Texas to California in June of 2010. Now, while they were in California, the Turpin parents actually renewed their vows with their children present, as well as they took the family to Disneyland. It was also in California that the children's waking nightmare would begin. Now, in California, the parents claimed that they were homeschooling their 13 children, going as far to have David listed as a principal on tax documents. However, this was a cover to keep the children home, so there was no outside witnesses to the abuse. Now, the children lived in filth. Jordan Turpin telling police that she woke up some days unable to breathe due to how dirty the living conditions were. For years, the parents locked their children inside, chaining them to their beds, beating and even strangling them. The children were fed once a day and only allowed to bathe once a year. The children were also so malnourished they looked much younger than their ages, and it was surprising some of them were alive. At 29 years old, Jennifer weighed just 82 pounds. One of the children had the arm circumference of a 4-month-old baby at 12 years old. Most were unable to read and knew virtually nothing about the outside world. In the early morning hours of January 18th, 2018, 17-year-old Jordan Turpin was able to get out of a window and escape. She then used a disconnected cell phone to call 911 and report that her parents were abusing herself and 12 siblings. She had to read her address off of a written paper stating, quote, "I haven't been out. I don't go out much. I don't know anything about the streets or anything," end quote. That night, David and Louise Turpin were arrested on suspicion of child abuse. Both parents were charged with 12 counts of torture, 12 counts of false imprisonment, 7 counts of abuse of an adult dependent, and 6 counts of child abuse. David was separately charged with lewd acts on a 14-year-old, and the pair pled not guilty on all counts. Louise's bail was set at $9 million and David's at $12 million. Now, Louise's attorney tried to have her placed in a pretrial diversion program due to having been diagnosed with histrionic personality disorder. The judge denied the motion. Now, an explanation of two of the things that I just touched on. Pretrial diversion programs essentially allow for the person to be released and are intended to help the person without going through the criminal process. Histrionic personality disorder is characterized mainly with attention-seeking behaviors and generally negative in nature. In February of 2019, both changed their plea from not guilty to guilty, receiving a plea deal that meant they only pled guilty to 1 count of torture, 3 counts of willful child abuse, 4 counts of false imprisonment, and 6 counts of cruelty to an adult dependent. Both were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As for the children, they were all hospitalized for 2 months following their parents' arrest. Now, doctors treated the malnourishment, heart issues, cognitive impairments, and neuropathy, to name just a few things. Following the hospital visit, these 6 minors were placed into foster homes. Unfortunately, in October of 2019, 5 of the children were adopted by an abusive family. Allegations included hitting them in the face with sandals, pulling their hair, hitting them with a belt, and striking their heads. The children were forced to eat excessively and then eat their own vomit. There were also accusations of molestation from the adoptive parents. The family was arrested and charged with abuse of children in their care. In 2020, it was reported that many of the children were living independently and that one had graduated college, though it was not all sunshine and rainbows for the children. In 2021, it was reported that many of the children were being neglected by social services, some were homeless, and none of them were authorized to use the hundreds of thousands in donations that were set up in a trust for the children. Jordan Turpin spoke out about being released without warning from a foster home with no real life skills, no plans for housing, and no knowledge of how to obtain housing, food, or health care. It was after this that a private law firm began looking into the neglect. Now, a lawsuit was filed in July of 2022 from the Turpin siblings. It was against the foster agency that placed them in the home where further abuse took place. This case is still pending. The abusive foster couple themselves were charged with 13 counts, including lewd acts with children, willful child abuse, fraud, and witness intimidation. They pled not guilty, and the case is not yet concluded. And that is all that I have for you today. I didn't want to spend too much time detailing the child abuse that happened, because that's mainly what this case was. There wasn't a lot of additional information to be had. It was just a lot of child abuse, and most people don't enjoy reading about that. But I am very much on the boat that children and animals are the most innocent, and while I may not like children, that does not mean that they deserve to be abused, and it is really gut-wrenching when people think that it is okay to abuse some of the most innocent members of society. And of course, the punishments didn't end for these children for being born. The foster agency obviously did nothing to help them. The fact that they were placed and allowed to be adopted, not just placed in a foster home, but were allowed to be adopted by people who then went on to abuse them again. So yeah, that was a tough case to read about, to learn about, and I think it's important that we talk about child abuse, that we talk about these cases, because it happens, and it happens every day. And that is so sad, but these people get away with it. They homeschool their children, or they don't register their births, and they just fall through the cracks. And then whenever they finally do get out, they go to a foster system, or they go to the police, and nothing happens, or they get placed in an even worse situation. So I believe that change is not going to happen unless we speak about it. We don't want to treat these things like it's taboo, because if you do that, then it tells victims they're not allowed to speak about it. But they are, and they need to. So yeah, there's the very heavy case for this week. Next week is not as heavy. I'm going to be talking about a scandal involving soybean oil, and that was super interesting. So check that out next Tuesday. But that's it. As I said earlier, I talked about South Dakota for cryptids, and yesterday I talked about corsets. Next week, I'm going to be talking about Texas for cryptids, a soybean oil scandal, and history I'm not sure yet, so check back on that one. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Bye.